We're super thrilled that you could join us today. My name is Nicole Kraft. I am an associate professor here in the School of Communication. I'm also in the State Sports and Society Initiative, and we're really excited to welcome you to this event, looking at the offense and the defense of name, image, and likeness, which is something I think a lot of us have heard about. How many of you feel like you have a good grasp of what name, image, and likeness entails? You could pretty much explain it to a fifth grader. Who could explain it? Janine, raise your hand. All right, so we have two people. We think that, okay, well, I think we have three people who could definitely explain it, and then we have three other people who are living it. And so we're going to get a perspective from both of them, from these two groups, and we're going to be able to ask questions of each of them and be able to see kind of how this is coming to fruition, what shape it's taking, how it's morphing, and it just morphed again last month and this month, and every month it feels like, and Logan will tell us about why he still has hair, even though it keeps morphing.
Yeah.
Here in the back is my colleague, Chris Knuster, who's in charge of research here at the Sports and Society Initiative. I just saw him walking around my other, right here, Brian Ruddy, who's the assistant director of Sports and Society, our administrator, Mayor Marshall, who made all the arrangements for us to be here. So we're super grateful. We have our intern, Claudia, super excited that she's here. Our new intern who's starting, that's Greg. He's going to be starting in January, right? Yeah, good. Okay. So, this is meant to be a conversation. So I obviously have questions. We want you to have questions. I know it can feel really uncomfortable, especially in a setting like this, to ask questions, but that's what they're here for, is to help us all understand this. And I may not have your question, and so I'm definitely going to be encouraging you to ask them, and I hope that you'll take advantage of that. Before we get started, I do want to acknowledge a tragedy that happened today with our friends at University of Virginia. There was a shooting, for those of you who are not aware, among football players at the University of Virginia. 3 football players were killed by a fellow member of their team. This is, no matter where you are in the world, this is something that affects us all, but especially those of us who are at a university and those of us who work in and with our student athletes. Logan and I were talking about it earlier, just really how much impact this has had on us. And I'd just like to, if we can have a moment of silence very briefly for those who we've lost, and just to make sure that they stay in our hearts. Thank you. So we are going to get started, and just to let everybody know, we are recording this. It's not going out live right now. It's only to our board members are able to watch it, but we will be releasing the video in an edited form to go out. So if anyone has any concerns about that or doesn't wish to be included, just let me know afterwards, and we'll make sure to edit out whatever portion you would feel of yours that you would not like us to include. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, because I always love to hear the people. And we're going to start over here on the left with Logan Hittle. So welcome, Logan.
Welcome. Thank you. Appreciate everyone coming out. I'm Logan Hittle, the director of name, image, and likeness within the Ohio State athletic department. I actually was a former student athlete here and played football in 2018 and 2019. So I graduated the university, currently finishing my master's degree. Thank you. Appreciate it. But really glad to be here and kind of navigate this conversation with you all, and lucky to be up here with 2 other phenomenal professionals in the space, and really kind of give some insight on what the space will look like from day to day in the past 16 months. So appreciate you having me, Nicole.
Luke?
Yes. Do we need to use the microphone?
Just use the microphone. Would you like us to? Sit in the back, Bruce. Is
that all right? Was the volume all right, Bruce?
Talk loud. I lost my voice last weekend, but we'll be all right. We're gonna make it through. So my name is
people are in the waiting
room. Wear 2 hats. I'm a practicing attorney. I'm the head of sports law at Porter Wright, partner here at the Porter Wright office here in Columbus, and I lead the sports law practice, which means as a non-agent sports attorney, I work in sports every single day with athletes, but not as their agent, really as like their general counsel. Reviewing anything that happens outside of their sport to make sure that they are protected. That caused me about 6 or 7 years ago to start a company called Anomaly Sports, to really focus on just how do we deliver education to athletes and to groups and to teams of athletes. So fortunate enough to work with now, because of name, image, and likeness, around 30-35 schools across the country, including Ohio State, which is fantastic. It's work with Logan on a regular basis, and went to law school at Paia, which is awesome. This panel right here, I feel like I'm at home. I'm so excited and really excited to have a conversation. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paia LaPalombara. I'm Assistant Athletic Director for Compliance at Ohio State. I've have a broad range of responsibilities, but I do have the opportunity to be a part of name, image, and likeness from an institutional side. So Logan and I work closely together on a day-to-day basis as we try to navigate what in the world NIL is. And then, yeah, Luke and I went to law school together, and we were just reminiscing on the fact that it's almost been 10 years since we graduated and don't know where the time has gone. But really excited to be here with you all today and try to talk through what we've learned over the past year and sort of where we see this going.
Welcome. We have a round of applause, please, guys. So Logan, I am going to ask you to start. We do hear the letters NIL a lot, and I'm not sure that any of us really know what it means. So in a nutshell, what does NIL, name, image, and likeness mean to our student athletes, to businesses, and to us as fans of sports?
Yeah, I feel like I'm stealing Luke's thunder because this is always his first pitch when he comes in to talk to student athletes.
You learned it.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. It's crazy. So name, obviously, we incorporate that to the student athlete. Everyone has a name, right? So on the back of their jersey, what that is, they're obviously able to now represent themselves and receive compensation, whether that is gift in kind, monetary compensation for some sort of service. So the name piece is pretty self-explanatory, and then obviously the image, whether it's a GIF or a GIF, is that how we say it?
Yeah.
Whatever, whoever's in one of those buckets, whatever one you pronounce, whether it's a visual representation of a student athlete. And then the likeness piece is, as Luke always likes to allude to, is if you're at the fair or carnival and you get a drawing or a representation, visual representation of yourself, that is your likeness. So making sure our student athletes understand each one of those three buckets and how they can obviously leverage that of their own personal name, image, and likeness to receive some sort of compensation or benefit. So I think that is actually what it means. But for me on the university side and working with student athletes, it's more about your personal brand. It's about the life skills that are created through NIL and name, image, and likeness opportunities. So yes, those are what those three words actually mean, but it's so much bigger than that. And I think we've done a great job institutionally to make sure our student athletes understand that and really know how to leverage it to not only external companies, organizations, and businesses, but to themselves and how they can continue to grow as a student athlete here at Ohio State. So that's exactly what the three words mean. And we'll defer to Luke to maybe talk more in depth about that. But from an institutional perspective, it's so much bigger than just making a monetary or a gift in kind exchange. It's more about how can you leverage the platform here at Ohio State and the student athletes that we have to continue to build their personal brand.
So look, it feels like we have this great definition of it, but it feels like it meant something before it came into existence, and it means something maybe a little bit different or a lot different now. What does NIL mean?
From a meaning perspective, it really means that student athletes can earn compensation like they've never been able to earn before. I mean, we're talking about the 70+ year history of, since athletic scholarships were first authorized. Student athletes now can earn compensation, which with that comes risks along with those opportunities. And so, even as we look at, where name, image, and likeness was in 2021 when it first launched versus where it is now, I think student athletes this year are in a unique spot because they're not all starting at the same point. Last year, everybody was starting kind of together, like figuring this thing out. And now student athletes really are figuring out, like, I can do this even if I'm not the elite athlete, even if I'm not the person that on Saturdays is, filling 100,000 plus people into a stadium. But if I have a following on social media, if I have something that's of interest to me, I can still engage in this. And I think what it, to Logan's point about branding, now name, image, and likeness really means leveraging my brand to earn compensation in ways that I've never been able to do before.
That seems like a really scary proposition in some ways. I mean, it seems exciting and it seems like it's long overdue, but and maybe you can start us by it also feels like it's open Pandora's box to a degree of spaces that maybe student athletes don't know how to navigate or have the opportunity coming into NIL and I don't want to say how they come to fruition, but what are some things that you have to be cautious about?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges here is, you have student athletes who are 18 to 22 years old. And I'm trying to think when I was back at that age, I would have just been excited for an opportunity. If someone had sent me a contract to sign, I would have signed it, not even read it. Which nowadays in my current position is like so cringeworthy. But I think that's just one of the challenges. It's just the education piece and like really making sure that student athletes understand that they have a value, they can advocate for themselves, they can negotiate for themselves. And the first offer that a company's giving them is not the best offer. And it's the same, in any piece of the corporate world when you join, someone gives you an offer and you counter. And I think that's what we really want to make sure that our student athletes understand is, this is not a time where they should be getting taken advantage of. This is a time where they have all the leverage because they're in a position to really be able to reach an audience that this company may not otherwise be able to reach. So I think that's one of the things that we've really worked through is that piece, like the contract negotiation, the tax component, because some of the student athletes as well are making pretty significant amounts of money and are doing so from multiple different sources as contractors. And so they need to be aware of, what they're going to be getting up front is going to be coming back in April to them. So how can they prepare themselves financially to be in that position to be able to pay their making sure that their earnings versus what they're being taxed on. So that's just coming from like the more risk side, which I guess is the compliance perspective. It's just making sure that, the student athlete understand that they're in a good position here, and they just need to find the resources and the right people around them to really help to support their brand and be there to be that tax expert, because that's not their job, is to understand the nuances of the rules, but to know that they have someone who can do that and help them at a later point with that.
Let's add just to reinforce something that Paia said. We have the opportunity to work with about half of the NFL and about 16 NFL teams. And this summer, we worked with about 7 or 8 during the off season with their rookies. And this is the first rookie class to participate in name, image, and likeness last year. And every single team had at least one person that came up after the workshop that said, I did name, image, and likeness last year. I didn't pay my taxes. What do I need to do now? Right. So it is very much a real issue. And those are the people that, assuming they made the roster, that are able to then afford to pay the penalties, the back tax, all that kind of stuff. I mean, imagine the student athlete that doesn't make it to the next level, hasn't paid their taxes. One of the things that Gene Smith has said, and that others, like, you don't want student athletes coming in and then leaving school in a worse position than when they started.
Now I'm scared.
Yeah.
So let's maybe start. We talked about this being the offense and the defense. So let's think offensively at first. Maybe Logan, you can help us see what are some of the opportunities that student athletes have had. Where are they? How do we see them? Maybe in ways that we don't actually see them, but they're taking advantage of this NIL, and how has it maybe changed their experience as a student?
Yeah, I think that I think that we've had a lot of success across, obviously, all 36 sports of ours have engaged. And to us, like I said, it's really making sure our student athletes feel empowered to tell their story, because that's really what it is at the end of the day. So it's all about storytelling, how student athletes can, once again, leverage the platform that they have at Ohio State and then tell their personal story and maybe get that out to a brand or a local company or organization that wants to support them and the values that they have. So you've seen maybe seen some of the content that's went out. So we had obviously some student athletes with the Chipotle and Express and the Right Rug commercial, which was one of the more impactful ones that we've done, which was 8 female student athletes across 8 sports. And it's really, really neat to see the student athletes work with a company where the values really align. And the company is willing to invest in our student athletes to then be able to tell their story. So once again, it's always educating the student athletes on the front end that this partnership is going to be a reflection of you and your brand long term. So making sure that alignment is right for them. But then also, how do you continue to build your brand so that the company feels like the investment was worth it, and then they're able to re-engage with maybe student athletes the next year. So not only are you helping yourself build your brand, but you're building the brand and the credibility for future student athletes at Ohio State. So there's been a lot of great opportunities for our student athletes to engage, and hopefully there will continue to be. And I think that one, we don't give enough credit to our coaches and our leadership of the student athletes we recruit, right? So the student athletes we bring in our buildings and the character that they have are easy to market. And I think that's what makes Ohio State so elite, is our coaching staffs do such a phenomenal job at recruiting high character, high talent, and really, really good people. And at the end of the day, that translates into success in NIL. So I think that it goes hand in hand, and that's why we've been able to kind of lead the country with success and obviously opportunities for our current student athletes.
So we are seeing, and we do have a question that came in from the audience earlier about recruiting. There have been some high profile moments related to recruiting. Quinn Ewers would be one. And then there's also this kind of a volleyball player who got a better offer from a university in the South, and a monetary offer, and ended up going there. So Luke, what are we seeing in terms of the impact on recruitment? Maybe from a defensive side of some of the things that student athletes have to navigate while they're in the middle of the recruitment process.
Sure. It's interesting. I just got off a call with the Wisconsin Intercollegiate Athletic Association with their executive director. interestingly, who she has a son that plays basketball at Michigan State and a son that plays in the NBA. And we were having this conversation specifically about recruiting because there a lot is happening as it relates to name, image, and likeness and recruiting at this point. And there's guidance from the NCAA as to what should or should not be happening. But we have to remember this. How do I say this? People cheated, right, to be quite blunt, before name, image, and likeness. And now name, image, and likeness, some people call it now it's legal, right? Because now they're able to do things in ways that before they couldn't, that now they can, right? So if we take a step back, I think from a recruiting perspective, name, image, and likeness is an asset, right? It's an asset to an institution in terms of what the institution is doing from a name, image, and likeness perspective. And so the appropriate way to use name, image, and likeness in recruiting is to use it just like you do any other assets of the institution. So coaching staff, location, academic history, tradition of their athletic programs, all of those facilities, right? All of those things that are touted during a recruiting trip or while recruiting a student athlete, name, image, and likeness is now one more asset. And different schools are engaging in very, very different ways. And so when you think about, hey, you just heard some of the ways in which Ohio State student athletes are engaging from Logan, right? So promoting that to parents and to prospective student athletes and talking about the education we're doing to help make sure that they're protected, the ways in which we can help them navigate effectively name, image, and likeness. Those are ways to appropriately use name, image, and likeness in recruiting. We also know that there are other schools out there that are just doing it inappropriately, which is, hey, through their collectives, which by the way, and I know we're going to talk collectives later, collectives are not supposed to use the promise of NIL deals to induce a student athlete, a prospective student athlete to attend a particular institution. But we know stories of schools that are doing just that, right? Which is just like what we've heard even before name, image, and likeness. So to get to the point of your question, name, image, and likeness is most sincerely a part of the recruiting process.
Well, let's talk about the booster. Which I think, I mean, I'll admit that I'm old, but it was a bad word in a lot of ways. Like, it almost seemed like it went hand in hand with the kind of party that was talking about. But now we have these booster run collectives. We have a great deal of involvement of boosters in the athletic space. What does that feel like to someone whose job it is to keep everything straight and narrow? And what does it mean? Like, can you help us understand what these booster run collectives mean from your perspective?
Yeah, so for those who aren't super familiar, NIL collectives they've been created in a lot of different ways. There's for-profits, there's nonprofits, there's LLCs, there's 501c3s. So there's no one size fits all for every NIL collective. But essentially what it is, it's a group of individuals who are putting their money together and are fundraising for the purpose of then distributing that money to student athletes for an NIL purpose. So the hope is that the student athlete is doing an activity to receive that NIL funding. And they have sort of taken off. They are, I would say, at most D1 institutions by this point, at least Power 5. There are a couple that are currently in existence at Ohio State. And I think what it really comes down to is engagement, is we've always had to engage with boosters. So those are donors to the athletics department, because there are specific NCAA rules that surround student athlete interactions with donors and boosters to the institution. So that's something that we've always had to do. It's just changed a little bit now, because instead of walling off the conversation where it's booster don't talk to student athlete don't talk to booster, we can't do that anymore, because as of now the booster is often the employer of the student athlete. And so what it is just sort of changing how we're educating and trying to make it more of a partnership, where individuals feel comfortable coming to us and asking questions before they go and act. And what we really try to remind both student athletes and then most specifically those who are members of NIL collectives is we all have one common goal, and that is to support our student athletes, to support the university. And to do that, we need to make sure that we're doing things the right way. Otherwise, we're bringing negative publicity to the institution. We could be impacting student athletes' eligibility, which is something we never want to do. And so we try to make sure that we're doing it in a partnership sort of manner. Can we always give everyone a yes? No, that's just not feasible. But we really do try to work with collectives and what their goals and missions are to find a way to get them as close to a yes as we can. So that they're doing things in a permissible way, but still, meeting the goals that they have And then also meeting the goals that our student athletes have when they're engaging with these collectives. So it's changed. It's just sort of transitioned where our job is, but we try to be nimble, and this is just another example of it.
Is that question?
You mentioned collectives and how that's been something that's changed since NIL's inception. What have been some other ways in which you've seen NIL and the way it's been defined, how you've seen that change?
Yeah, so
You can always have.
okay, I think just the big area is just amateurism. So there's always been a very traditional version of what amateurism is, which is a student athlete cannot be paid for anything related to their name, image, and likeness. They have one sort of specific goal and responsibility while they're a student athlete, and that is be a student, to be an athlete, and then to have a regular job like anyone else. So I think that's been the most drastic change, just sort of understanding that the world how we know it is completely different. Luke can probably talk better about this, but there's also a lot of cases that have gone recently through the federal circuit. So right now there's a case in the federal circuit court, the Ninth Circuit, related to NIL. It's an antitrust lawsuit that may be a class action suit that could result in potentially current student athletes and former student athletes receiving funding from the institution. And I think this is specific to revenue sharing for broadcasts. So that's a big one. That's going to potentially change from like a student athlete, a student to university relationship to an employee-employer relationship. That's a big one that could be coming up soon. Then we most recently had the Alston case, or Alston versus NCAA. That was a decision from the Supreme Court that just came down right before NIL legislation went into effect, which changed the definition of athletic scholarship and now allows for student athletes to receive above the cost of attendance that they were previously limited to. So I think in general, we just are in the process of changing our minds of what the definition of student athlete is and what their relationship is to their university. So again, it's a lot of just broader thinking of how we need to start preparing ourselves for that next step.
Yeah, I would add to that, just say all that and more, right? I mean, there are so many changes that have been happening. And one to think about is, when the transfer portal rule changed in 2020, and then you have name, image, and likeness that went into effect in 2021, I think that we're going to see much more of a quasi-free agency kind of marketplace now, especially at the end of football season, than we had previously, right? We started to see a little glimpse of that early on, but now I think, especially with the growth of collectives and others, I think we're going to see a lot of student athletes are going to look at transitioning, and I think name, image, and likeness and/or the promise of money is going to be a lot of the reasons why. Because think about it, at the pro level, when you have free agency, there are guidelines, there are restrictions, because it is intentional free agency, right? Like, you are now free to contract with another club, another entity, another organization, and they can do whatever to recruit you there. When you think about name, image, and likeness, that was not the intent. That's never been the intent in college sports. And so, but because you have the ability for student athletes to now transfer without sitting out for a year, and the opportunity for student athletes to be able to earn compensation, you bring those together, it creates this almost quasi-free agency kind of marketplace. I think the other significant change too has been just as we've looked at name, image, and likeness now at the high school level, right? So we're talking college, obviously, here at Ohio State, but as of today, there are 20 high school athletic associations across the country, 20 out of the 51 states plus DC, athletic associations that are allowing it. And we know for a fact that there are at least one or two more that are going to be approving it in December. So we could end the year with about half of the public high school athletic associations across the country approving name, image, and likeness, which is significant. But I think finally, the last thing I'll say, I think that also has been a big change is that when name, image, and likeness was first talked about, a lot of people thought that it was, oh, that's just for the elite athletes. Like, don't worry about it. Like, it's not going to affect our school or our institution. It's not going to affect us as a D3 institution or what have you. Like, that's for those elite athletes that are in revenue producing sports. And we've most certainly seen that that's not the case. And that student athletes, regardless, I always like to say NIL is really like an equal opportunity for all student athletes, male, female, doesn't depend on matter what sport you're in, doesn't matter what size of school you're in. It's about the opportunity to be able to earn compensation. And if student athletes are creative, they can find ways to do that in their own life that's authentic to them.
Yeah, and I'll go off of that. I think the narrative was originally the misconception that it was for football and basketball, men's and women's. So I think that has kind of changed, and that's a misconception, especially from my seat when you see it every day and you work with student athletes from 36 different sports, male, female, revenue, non-revenue, Olympic, non-Olympic. So really having the opportunity to engage at the level that they want to engage. And I think the other misconception is, oh, all 1,100 student athletes at Ohio State are going to want to engage in NIL. Like, that's also not the case. So not every student athlete is interested in doing this, right? So some are really interested in, focusing on going to get a postgraduate degree, and they want to be elite in their sport, and NIL isn't something that they want to engage in, which is completely fine. And in our role and in our athletic department, it's really important to make sure everyone understands that they're able to engage if they want to, and we're going to support them and provide resources to do so, but it's not something that they have to engage in. So I think that that's a change that has kind of happened over the last 16 to 17 months is those misconceptions that were originally set out that Luke kind of spoke to. We've kind of seen those be eliminated. And the data kind of shows that it is actually for anyone that wants to engage, but not everyone does want to.
Do you have any idea of how many student athletes among 1,000 or so we have?
We have about 370 that have engaged this point. That's with data that's been disclosed to us.
And that's
So,
across all 36 sports
Yeah.
too.
So
So we have another question. Yeah.
Sorry. To expand a little bit more on the collective, really, I know it's maybe a broad answer, so I know it sounds like you guys are smart with this, but can you go a little bit more detail about because how I understand it is the gathering collective, like you said, they put this money in a pot, and you may have somebody in that group say, hey, I want somebody to go to a football program, and they want to put money towards a certain athlete, so are you saying that you can't do that, I guess? I don't know. I don't even know how to ask the question. It sounds like it
Maybe
was
Luke
so.
can.
Sure, I think it'll probably be a combo. We'll do a
Yeah,
1-2
okay.
combo here. So, so collectives can be created however they want to be created, right? So Paia said it earlier, you can be for-profit, nonprofit. Really all it is usually a donor, usually somebody who's wealthy or connected to wealthy individuals that says, I care about this particular institution, whatever institution it is. I want to make sure that NIL deals go to student athletes at that institution. They usually have no idea what to do after that, right? Now, all they know is they want to get money in the hands of student athletes through NIL deals. And so they can be created to just focus on one particular sport if they want to. They could be a football specific, because again, it's not run by the institution. So you don't have the same Title IX concerns directly because it's not run by the institution. It's a separate, completely separate and distinct entity. So it could be a football only collective. But what they can't do are certain things that the NCAA said they can't do. So they can't go out and promise deals to prospective high school student athletes. They can't induce transfers, right? So they can't go and say, okay, we're going to, collective here at Ohio State, we're going to go and try to recruit this player from, pick your other institution and try to get him to come here. And as it relates to some of the most recent guidance that came out, coaches and administrators from an institution can be involved with the promotion and fundraising for a collective, but they can't then direct where the collective actually spends their money in terms of what student athletes. So Coach Day or Coach Holtman or pick any other coach can't come to a collective at Ohio State and say, hey, I might lose this particular player. I need you to give this player this deal worth that much money to keep him here, right? But beyond that, there's not like a lot of other definitive guidelines. Let's keep in mind, 16 months ago, 18 months ago, the phrase NIL collective didn't even exist, right? This whole concept is brand new, birthed out of people who have money, who want to try to get around the system of traditional ways of engaging with athletic departments, trying to now be an armchair GM or an armchair coach at a particular institution by putting funds towards student athletes, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That makes a lot of sense. And the other pieces that we sort of think about from an NCAA perspective is, are the student athletes actually doing something for the money? So there can't just be, payment for not work performed. There has to be a quid pro quo arrangement there. So that's just one of the things that we check on and we educate, is to make sure it's not just money going from one hand to another, but there's work performed. So I'm sure if you followed any of the NIL collectives associated with Ohio State on social media, you can see that our student athletes who have contracts or have NIL deals with these collectives are out in the community and doing things for what the compensation that they're going to be receiving. But I think Luke really hit on the point here is it's it can't be the connection point between coach and collective. So that's where we really try to do a lot of our education is collective. You can make whatever decisions you want with current student athletes, but you can't call our coach and ask who he or she wants this money to go to. That has to be collective completely on your own accord. You figure out what you want to do with your money. So it is that connection that we really need to make sure that we're keeping separate. But besides that, Luke is spot on. There's really not much that we do in terms of governing them.
I've seen reports of like Coach Day talking about how to keep OSU's current football program competitive. It's about going to cost about 11-12 million a year. There's reports that there's a commit going to 5-star quarterback going to Tennessee is going to be making $9.5 million at Tennessee. And I know that recently now the NCAA has come out with like restating basically what you guys have been talking about, like with collectives, what they can and can't do. I'm just curious what your guys' thoughts are on that, and kind of now that it's not really so much as a black market for what it costs them to keep teams competitive in the NCAA, and how you see kind of the market for student athletes and NIL deals should be in the future.
Well, we can hear from the
Yeah, what are you guys doing for dinner? Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think what we try to there's the right way to do things and there's the wrong way to do things. It's clear that there are some institutions that are not doing things the appropriate way or the way that they should be under NCAA rules. But what we really try to remind our coaches, and when we meet with recruits and talk through NIL opportunities here, is Ohio State is so much more than that. Like, if you want a great education, if you want top-notch athletics programs, if you want access to incredible resources across the department. And on top of that, you will then be associated for the rest of your life with the Ohio State brand. So whether or not you can use the trademark is one thing, but you can be associated with that brand, and that brand is incredibly strong. And that's something that will continue forever. Like, I'm sure whenever any of you are wearing your Ohio State gear throughout anywhere in the world, you're getting an OH in the airport. Like, the furthest I've gotten one is in Nepal. I was at Everest Base Camp and I got an OH from someone from Nebraska, actually, but they were just excited to see another Big Ten person. So the brand has such a big reach, and I think that's the important piece. So while our coaches and collectives can't directly promise a certain amount of money to student athletes, what they can use is the fact that Ohio State has so much. We have such a huge broadcast and media presence, a big footprint. And that has led to a lot of great opportunities, and they can share all of those wonderful opportunities that our student athletes have already received. In addition to that, Columbus is just such a great corporate headquarters area as well. Like, there are so many companies here that want to be affiliated with our student athletes and with the Ohio State brand. And so that's just another big selling point that you can get here that you may not at another, Division I school that may be in a smaller market. So it's really, I think it's just sort of reframing it. But it is a challenge. I think that's something that we're always going to be up against now on the recruiting trail, is by doing things the right way, you're putting yourself in a disadvantage. But that's always been the case on the recruiting trail. There's always been people who are doing things the wrong way.
Yeah. And Coach Day and other coaches, both basketball and football elite across the country, have kind of talked about how we're probably in this kind of maybe 1 or 2 more years period of just the wild west, as this all kind of comes in and levels out a little bit. To your point about the Tennessee quarterback, with the alleged, $8.5 million, contract, that came before the NCAA's, not the most recent, but the prior guidelines on not allowing collectives to do deals with prospective student athletes. So that was one where that's just what it is. Now, is that athlete actually going to make that $8.5 million? From what I've heard, nobody's actually seen the contract. The Athletic has a reporter that said that they saw the contract and could kind of talk about it, but it was over multiple years and certain things that have to, take place in order for that to happen. But I think you're absolutely right. And I think what we're seeing is what we've always known. College football in particular is a very wealthy, money-driven organization. Period. Like, surprise, in case anybody didn't know, hey, it is. There's a lot of money in college football. And I think that as we look at the players that create the product on the field that adds the value to even create a $7.5 billion, media deal with a conference, that comes from the players performing on the field. So the idea of them being able to potentially, get $1 million+ deal to go play somewhere, That's absolutely real and it's realistic. So Coach Day has real serious concerns that if I want to keep this roster in place, I know that these players are going to be attracted, other people are going to attract them with opportunities for deals in other schools. But to Paia's point, we got to be able to rely on, or he has to be able to rely on, that the community is going to come together to provide deals to student athletes here at Ohio State, and the tradition, the coaching staff, the opportunities, the brand of Ohio State will also carry weight in keeping them as well.
Well, then you have a really unique perspective in the sense that you've been inside the locker room and how you're helping people who are in there now.
Yeah.
I'm curious what the effect is. I saw a bigger than life size billboard, or I would say cutout of CJ. It scared the crap out of me in this market selling seltzers. Like, and when you think about it, he's like everywhere now, and he's making a lot of money, and we know how much money in concept he's making. What is the effect on a locker room when you have people that are making so much, and then you have people who aren't making anything?
Yeah, actually, I wrote a lot of papers on this in undergrad and not knowing I'd be in this seat today. So oddly enough. But I had the same kind of hesitation and reservation about it. But I'm going to go back to what I alluded to earlier. And at some places there might be a weird dynamic, right? You see some articles across the country of teams having players sit out and this and that. But I'm going to go back to my previous point of, like, here at Ohio State, our coaches do such a good job at recruiting such high character student athletes that I think we have the right people in place to where that's not their main priority. Yes, you're going to have student athletes that are going to do really, really well. You're going to have student athletes that maybe wish they had more opportunities, but at the end of the day, I think the people that we have in place, and the coaching staff and support staff and the student athletes all understand what the main goal of Ohio State is, and that's the student athlete, holistic student athlete experience. And so I think we've done a great job incorporating NIL, like we've said, into our circle of care. So academics, nutrition, sports performance, and all those things, to where it's just another addition of how we service our student athletes. And so student athletes, like I said, I don't know that there's any bad feeling or ill intent in locker rooms just because they want to win, they want to be competitors, and they're happy to be at Ohio State. And then if there's NIL opportunities that come with that and they're able to kind of seize those opportunities, then great. But I think that is all a credit to our leadership, like I said, and our coaches and the program that they've created. So I don't think that we have those issues. And like I said, that's on a bigger kind of level of what we've been able to create. So
yeah, I just wanted to ask, I know that you mentioned a lot how in terms of us versus like other schools, how we're kind of approaching NIL collectives. Is it more of a disadvantage, I guess, for like smaller schools and programs with students like potentially transferring, or like that recognition to be able to get that, I guess, NIL deal and receive that compensation? That like for us compared to like Cincinnati or somewhere similar to a smaller size school, has that been like a bigger issue? I know they also have their transfer guidelines now, but like before that, was that a pretty big problem at the time?
Oh, sorry.
if you want.
I mean, I think the people have been transferring for, as long as people have gone to schools, right? So I think you have that now with name, image, and likeness, it's still the same thing. A student athlete can transfer for the opportunity. So Cincinnati has a pretty good program, football program, right? So, but pick any school. I think the heart of your question gets to will the haves continue to have and the have-nots continue to have not? And I think name, image, and likeness is interesting, kind of sport by sport. And I think to your point about smaller schools and opportunities, basketball is very different than football. So a name, image, and likeness deal to recruit an elite basketball player, one basketball player can have a much bigger impact, right, on a team than recruiting one football player, right? Because of all that goes into it, the number of players on the field, et cetera, et cetera. But one basketball player could help lead a Cinderella story during March Madness, right? That drives so much out of it. I think, and as a side note, I think this March Madness, we're going to see college student athletes everywhere during the commercialization of March Madness, without question. But I think, yes, there's sports differences, but to your point, smaller schools, yeah, I mean, it's just, forget name, image, and likeness. They've always been at a disadvantage when it comes to that, right? Because coaching staff and a small school isn't going to pay $100 million for a football coach or whatever ridiculous numbers for facilities and things like that. But the opportunity for a student athlete to transfer for bigger NIL deals, yes, that could exist, but that's not just a school size opportunity. That's also a community opportunity, which is why I think Columbus here, I think Austin, Texas, right, where University of Texas kind of runs everything. I think those are some areas where student athletes can do really well because the competition from pro teams doesn't really exist in the same way. Yeah, we got the Blue Jackets, we got the Crew, but from a commercialization perspective, everybody knows Ohio State football is everything here in this community that's filled with Fortune 500 companies and other kind of corporate partners. But if you're at Creighton in Nebraska, right, you could still be the person, right? Like that whatever your sport is that happens to draw the community around you to support you with name, image, and likeness opportunities.
Yes, yeah, I think that was great. I just wanted to ask, I think you touched on it well, do you think there's gonna be like a greater divide in that like recruiting ability between schools because of NIL, or do you think it will be pretty much the same as it has been, I guess?
My personal opinion, and you guys can disagree, I think it's going to be the same as it always has been, because I think you could look at Jackson State and Deion Sanders at HBCU and the opportunities to recruit talent there. You could look at, I had a conversation with somebody who is in line to be an HBCU president, who talked about how if he could go and get 5 companies to agree to commit $1 million, he's going to recruit the best basketball team, period, in the country, right? And he could probably do that. Right. So I think that in some respects, I don't think that it's going to just continue to expand the divide. I think we're going to see more and more schools become more and more creative about how they can leverage their particular community, their particular local business relationships, their corporate partnerships, and whatever is unique to their particular institution to help make name, image, and likeness special to their institution.
All right, well, actually, we're gonna take one more question and then we are gonna switch out and these guys are gonna take a seat in the front and we're gonna hear what NIL looks like from 3 extraordinary women who are in this.
Yes, we are.
Dunks to us.
Talk a little bit about the transfer portal, but have you seen with the extra year that a lot of athletes have from COVID and a lot of transfer from around that maybe it's an extra year that they could make money or something like that has impacted how NIL has worked, because at the same time, it's been the extra year of COVID and NIL almost at the same time.
Yeah, it's been pretty much a perfect storm of the COVID bonus year, NIL, and the new transfer rules that just went through. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's something that student athletes are weighing on a day-to-day basis when they're considering whether they want to either go pro or consider going pro, or graduate and get a job or stay an additional year. Is especially like at Ohio State with such a great brand, this is an opportunity to maybe earn some additional income to pay off some loans that maybe you had as an undergrad, or to like set up like a little nest egg so you can buy yourself a house or a condo or something like that. So I'm sure that that's been weighing into the consideration there, either at the current institution or at the next institution. So the NCAA just recently changed the transfer rules again, which is making it not more challenging for student athletes to transfer, but making it more challenging for institutions, or making institutions consider more closely whether they want a student athlete to transfer into their school. So that's just been a more recent change, but I'm sure for the past year, that is something student athletes have considered is, do I take this bonus year and really capitalize on it? And I think that would be, a great decision, a smart business decision for them. All right, I'm going to ask you guys if you would switch places.
Yeah.
We're going to come back.
Yeah, let's go. Good luck. Let's go. Let's go.
All right, welcome. We have 3 members of our incredible women's volleyball team who won last night in spectacular fashion. So you guys introduce yourselves and tell us your year and your major.
My name is Emily Londot. I'm a junior and I'm majoring in sports industry.
I'm Cindy Taylor. I'm a sophomore and I'm majoring in business marketing.
Hi, I'm Sarah Sue Morbitzer and I'm a junior majoring in exercise science.
So when you two specifically started here, there was no NIL. What was your thought process as coming to obviously a very prominent Division I school, but recognizing that your chances to make money off your skills and your image just really didn't exist at that time? Was it something that entered into your thought process at all? Sarah Sue, can you start?
A little bit. I don't have a huge name in Ohio State volleyball or just college athletics in general, so I didn't think I would benefit at all in this space, if I'm being totally honest.
I mean, definitely kind of the same at that time, but in my hometown, like my name is pretty much everywhere, not to be
You don't have.
But yeah,
Okay.
I'm very well known in the small town of Utica. So just like being able to use that now has really been helpful.
And when you came in, Sydney, it was just beginning. I mean, and obviously lots of things were just beginning. We were in the middle of COVID and we did lots of fun things when you started, but were you think, and you come, this is your kind of home space, were you thinking this is something that you'd be able to maximize kind of your opportunities if you came to Ohio State and you could use your name and your image in order to help kind of build a nest egg for yourself?
Yeah, I didn't really know much. I think being a freshman, I was so worried about all the other things that come with freshman year. So, and I was definitely not something I thought about by any means. And just the craziness of it, I was like, this is not for me right now. So yeah, definitely down the road, I was like, I could definitely do something cool, but at the moment, I was like, this is not for me whatsoever. So
When did you guys start to realize that not only was opportunity here, but it was something that you could grab and do, maybe something you've already been doing? And if you could, I don't, where did this idea come from for the camps? Who kind of had it first?
I can start.
Okay, could you maybe share with them what you guys are doing and where the genesis was of that idea?
Yeah, so when our July 1st, that year that it came into action, I started camps kind of right away. That July, I started with my mom, helped a ton, but I had a week of camps and it went really well. It was just a week, 1 hour sessions, and then season started. So of course I didn't do much. We were so busy. And then on winter break, I started with Sydney and we had our own just defensive sessions because we're both defensive players. And then that went really well. And then the idea of all three of us kind of emerged because we're all from Columbus and we all played at the same club. So we wanted to use that to our advantage. And that's when Local Dreamers became a thing.
So it feels like, you know, sort of like the Hallmark movie kind of thing. Like there's an idea and then it's successful, but it feels like there's probably a lot of stuff that went on, even, you know, finding space for it, marketing yourselves. Walk us through, if you could, and you know, each one of you, the step that you took. How did you take this from idea to actual fruition, and maybe what were some of the challenges along the way?
Yeah, we definitely learned a ton. Facility was definitely something that we thought about. Luckily, my mom was my high school coach, so we used my high school gym for a lot of the camps, and then we used that for my sessions that July, and then also throughout Christmas break. And then in the spring last year, we decided we should go to high schools and schools around Central Ohio because we all three have a name in Central Ohio. So my mom, again, she's kind of our agent throughout all of this, but she sent out emails to a bunch of Central Ohio coaches because she sent us so many contacts. And a lot of schools, they're like, yes, the 3 Ohio State players coming to my school for a day, absolutely. So facilities actually worked out for us because we didn't have to find any. We just went to a high school.
What were some of the steps along the way for the two of you, and in terms of marketing it, or you know, just kind of committing your time, deciding what you would coach? How did you sort of work all these details out?
It was a long process. I think we went probably 2 months of us just like throwing out ideas to each other, you know, texting like every week we would send something new. And then I think at the end of those 2 months, and we kind of like actually came together and created a plan. Like when Sarah said, we emailed a bunch of coaches, and then we were like, it's getting real, like we need to do this now. And then like ideas for t-shirts came out, and then so we started making those and we started posting on social media. Now we have an Instagram page with a little bit of followers.
Follow us.
A little bit of local prisons. But yeah, I think just getting over that hump of starting is always the scariest part. And I think now that our name's out there a little bit, I think we're just gonna keep growing from here.
I think an important part too is just the relationships that we created. I think that goes such a long way, especially with doing camps, like knowing that all of these little girls want to be you and be in your spot one day. I think for us, like that's so important just to see those little girls in the crowd. So who we are as people and like how we treat them in these camps and get to know them on a personal basis, like that's going to go such a long way in how our little business like keeps going throughout the year. So I think that's super important. And then even though we're in season, we don't have that much time to do camps or clinics right now, like still reaching out to these girls or these programs and saying good luck in their season, or doing a day in the life on our Instagram is going to keep them engaged, even if we physically can't hold camps right now.
I actually got an email from a freshman at a high school today asking when we're gonna hold our next camp. So that's just like the relationships we built. She came to one of our camps throughout the summer, and it's so cool to build relationships with these young girls.
Now, I know that Ohio State has had camps for years. I mean, I teach in the summer, I teach student athletes, gymnastics does a camp, soccer does a camp, everyone does a camp. But up until recently, those were camps that Ohio State put on, Ohio State collected the revenue for, and you participated in. How has that shifted now in the summer in terms of the things that you are expected to do and your expectation for compensation while you're doing?
I mean, we'll definitely still be expected to do like team camps and OSU camps. But then we'll just capitalize on the time we do have for ourselves, and people want us to come to their schools and do clinics, because those smaller groups of people having more one-on-one time with us three, with smaller groups of people, I think they just really want to learn from us and have those relationships like Sydney was talking about. So I think that's what really makes our camps valuable.
I don't mean to be insensitive here, but we have to talk about money to a degree. How did you kind of conceptualize how much you wanted to charge? What were some of the business arrangements that you had to make? Obviously, you have to take payments. And I'm curious what it felt like to finally be asking people to pay you for things that you would probably been doing for free for quite a while.
The payment part was really hard for us because we didn't want to charge too much. We didn't want to charge too little. When I first saw my camps throughout that first week of July, I had people coming up to me and was like, "You're only charging $25, and that's not enough. Like, you play at Ohio State, you have a big platform. You need to be charging more." I was like, "All right, sure." I was like, "Okay," but and so the payment part was really hard because we're going to some communities that aren't very profitable and families that don't have a ton of money. So we didn't want to charge $100 for a camp. And when we went to the high schools, we charged different amounts for different amount of time. We had a 2-day camp and a 1-day camp with different amounts. But yeah, that was a really hard piece for us. You guys can touch on that.
Just adding to the part of like communities. We went to my high school, which is a smaller community with people who play sports for fun, and being able to go there and teach these girls volleyball because we are like people can pay the amount that we offer, was just really inspiring to me, just because like they want us there and we want to be there, and being able to profit off of it as well is good.
Any advice about what to charge? And we know that women historically kind of undervalue themselves, and no one can argue with your accomplishments or your success and the names that you do bring. So, who advised you, and what was some of the advice that you got, and what did it feel like to take that advice, if you did?
My mom helped me a ton in that space. She actually contacted some other coaches around Central Ohio, like Pickerington, some Hillard schools. Like, what do you think they should be charging? Like, what would, if you had a daughter, if you were sending your daughter to a camp, what do you think is a reasonable amount to pay? And some schools actually paid it entirely themselves. So I think actually Utica, they didn't have their girls pay because it was still, I think it was $60, but it's still, that's a little too much, I guess. So they had, some schools had, like, they just honestly handed us a check and told us to split it 3 ways. But yeah, so contacting some other coaches, contacting some people at our old club.
Yes. We had questions about the effect that it has on that extra year of eligibility that you have, your ability to make money here. How has the ability to make money affected kind of your relationship with Ohio State, with your space on the team, and how long you might spend on this team?
Yeah, I think for me, just like they touched on it earlier, but you can literally do whatever you want in like the most authentic way. It doesn't have to be the biggest NIL deal ever, but if you wanted, like, to me, doing camps, like, that is so fulfilling, and like that's just the best thing that I could do personally. Yeah, I don't have an extra year eligibility, but just knowing that, like, trying to capitalize as much as I can. And like Logan, he has done so many things for us and just so many resources. So using the NIL space to like make those relationships to what you want to be is the best thing for me.
I think just also capitalizing on the relationships with like businesses and stuff like that can help you after college too. And I think that extra year, like, yes, people may use it, people may not use it. Like, they could get more getting a job with these businesses instead of working through NIL. So I think it's definitely a personal decision, but I could see it going both ways for a lot of people and just using it.
Has there been any noticeable influence with the rest of your teammates after you guys have started this kind of class together? Have you inspired them to do their own things, or is it something you guys now talk about and kind of share your wisdom?
Some girls have ran camps after us, some of our seniors this year, but like Logan said earlier, it hasn't had a ton of impact in our locker room. Like, we don't go around bragging about any NIL brands, deals that we have. We're there to be a team, be a family, and I think that's it's most important.
And I think we're super supportive of each other. Like, if we see something that one of our teammates is doing in the media, like, repost automatically, because it helps their brand, but it also showcases like the hard work they put into that. And I think like Logan told us that, and we're like, yeah, like, absolutely. So I think in the locker room, when we talk about things, it's like, wow, that is so cool. Or you did this, that's awesome. I think it actually inspires people to go do what they want. You don't have to copy. I don't do what Sarah Sue does or what Emily does, but like, do whatever you want. I think there's so many deals and opportunities that we're inspiring each other to do, but at a personal level too.
I had a softball girl text me and ask us like all the details of how we do this. And I think that's just really cool how we can help other Ohio State student athletes learn how to do this. And like, they're not going to be competing with us because it's two different sports. So I think just being able to have that influence on our classmates is really cool.
We also had the question about going to Ohio State versus going somewhere else. And I know obviously you went to Ohio State, so you have that expertise, but suppose, did you ever think about if you had gone to a Cincinnati, as was mentioned, or to, a smaller school like Dayton or something where you could have still excelled in your sport, but maybe the NIL deals were not significant? How do you think that being at Ohio State is going to shape kind of the recruitment as it relates to NIL moving forward?
You guys have that.
I'll make Logan answer.
I mean, going through the recruiting process, NIL wasn't that much of a thing yet, but now, like, looking back, I think it definitely has a huge part in just the impact Ohio State has had in the NIL space. I think it is really attractive for student athletes, no matter who you are. So I think it does play a role and will in the upcoming years too.
Do you guys have questions for them?
I'm just curious, like, how social media is playing in all this, because like, unlike our parent generation, like, we're probably the better experts on that, especially like the kids that are gonna have it more so.
It's played a huge role, I think. We have the Instagram, Local Dreamers Instagram. It only has about 300 followers, but our own personal accounts,
60 soon.
but our own personal accounts have helped a ton. We probably annoyed our followers because we were posting about our camp so much, but it's definitely played a large role. I would think the most important role, honestly.
And yeah, I'm on Facebook, which a lot of people our age aren't, which is fine, but I think through Facebook I can connect to all the parents that are needing these camps for their kids, and just being able to use that and connect with those families, I think, is really good.
And it, like, using social media just gives you such a good platform to use it like how you want to, in so many ways, but also that comes with risk of how you use your media. So I think having the resources and the education that Ohio State has provided us has helped a ton in the social media space a lot.
Maybe his parents are the experts, at least on Facebook.
Yes.
Let's not judge old people. Have there been other opportunities that have come off of this? Are there other NIL opportunities you guys are thinking about, or that you've been approached about? And obviously your team has been just incredible. I mean, every year it feels like that, this year especially. So when you get this kind of level of confidence, what kind of opportunities come your way?
I think we're still definitely going to continue the camps this, maybe even winter break and then into the spring. From this, I don't really have any deal coming my way, but
Yeah, I don't think anything specifically, just from the camps, but just like using your media to do other things, like Logan mentioned earlier, but the Right Road commercial, like, that was really cool, just working with a business I never thought I'd work with, but they were awesome. So I think just small things or big opportunities will come your way, even if it's not about camps or volleyball, like, other things will come your way with other deals.
Yeah, I'm on the same as Sarah, like no specific deals have come our way, but also seeing the local Dreamers t-shirts everywhere you look, like at our games, they're wearing them, like hopefully they're wearing them at school and people ask them questions and then that games are following. So I think just having that extra, like, I don't know the word. Get it out there, like boost to get it out there, just really helps to lead us in the right direction of growing this camps that we have.
What would you tell other people who wanted to do something similarly? And you know, it was mentioned that, you know, we often think about football and basketball and they're going to be, you know, so successful, but I think you guys are living proof that all of our sports are, have the opportunity to capitalize on this NIL opportunity. So what would you help other people understand?
I think Sid said it earlier, but or maybe Emily, but starting is the scariest part. So I think getting over that hump of starting is very important. And even grabbing two teammates and like, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to run some camps? Because we have such a big platform at Ohio State and we can make such a big impact. So even if you don't have a big name in college athletics, you can definitely benefit in this space.
I would tell them to definitely, like, you have to be passionate about it to do this. It's long days. Like we went to 2 schools in one day once and it was like 7 hours on our feet, which is tough, but just the fact that we could be so influential to these kids, and just really have an impact. So you have to be really passionate about influencing the next generation.
I'd say definitely stay organized. I think Sarah Sue can talk a lot more about this, but the amount of just organization and things you have to disclose. I mean, if we're selling a shirt, we have to know their name and what size they got because there's just so many rules in that space. So we have a huge Excel sheet. I think it was too big to even put in the app. So there's just a lot of organization. And I think that's when student athletes really need to advocate and ask for help, ask for, how do I do this? How do I disclose this? And I think that was a huge part. And I mean, Sarah Sue can talk about it because it was a lot. But
Well, I was going to ask you what some of the pitfalls were, like the things that in hindsight you're like, God, I had no idea that it was going to be this. So that sounds like a perfect segue to that.
Staying organized, honestly, and the teacher and my mom really helped in that.
How did you
space.
start and how did it evolve? Like, when did you realize, oh my God, I'm not doing this the way it needs to be done?
Yeah, at first in that first July, I was just having some sign-in sheets and having people write their name down, who paid for it, and that was all. I was like, well, this is not going to cut it for 60 campers. So that's when my mom came in and she made all the Excel sheets, made all of the like t-shirt forms, disclosure form. Like she helped a ton in that space, and it was hard to stay organized and on top of school and summer workouts and all of that. So we definitely learned along the way.
Were there other things that surprised you? I mean, you mentioned about kind of how physically taxing, and there's no subbing out in this case. Like you're on point. Yeah. What were some other things that as you were doing it, you're like, oh wait, I didn't realize this was gonna happen.
I have another one.
Go ahead.
I think something little was just like, we can't wear Ohio State marks at our camps.
Okay.
And so I think the first camp, we're texting a group chat, hey, what are you gonna wear? Because that's all we have.
Right.
We only have Ohio State here. And so that's when we decided to make the t-shirts. So we can wear our t-shirts. We made 3 different colors with the same logo and we wore those to the camp. But just something little, like a mark on the shoe, we can't have. So we had to go get new Nikes and some Hokas and like just little things like that, I think. But
Are you still required to wear Nikes and drink Coke?
yeah, Nike's pretty much our life.
But I mean, is that maybe you guys can help us understand? Do they, when they're doing an NIL experience like this, do they have to follow the same rules that they would as part of the university?
No, they wouldn't have to wear, I mean.
Yeah, different.
It's the rules.
Sorry. So yeah, if it's happening on campus, then there are some contracts like the Coke contract and the Nike contract that trump everything else that a student athlete is doing. But when they're on their own free time, they don't have to just wear Nike or just drink Coke products. They can promote other brands or just wear other brands. So like Hoka is a great example. Those cushiony, soft little pillows of dream with it there.
They helped for 7 hours. So
Yes. So yeah, it's different. They have more flexibility there. But then yeah, as Sarah mentioned, the lack of being able to use university trademarks is a big one.
How did you guys realize that? I mean, is that something that Logan taught you before you ever started this endeavor? Was it something that surprised you? How does that kind of come about to realize that all your clothes are useless?
I remember the first summer we had it was just a session, it was with Open Doors at the time, and they were telling us all these do's and don'ts. And we sent a lot of t-shirt designs back and forth, like, hey, Dad, how does this look? And he's like, well, you use Blocko, so it doesn't look pretty good. So I think our actual first name was Hometown Buckeyes.
Okay.
So Buckeyes couldn't be used, Hometown obviously could be, and so I think our brothers actually came up with Local Dreamers, but yeah, there was a lot of rules, and we saw a lot of pictures back and forth.
What does that feel like? I mean, you wear it all the time. You promote the university you promoted them last night and beat the Cornhuskers. When you realize that when you want to do things on your own, that you can't wear that anymore, how does that make you feel as a student athlete?
I think it definitely like lets you kind of step out of the Ohio State student athlete role and into like, I'm Emily Londot, and like this is what I'm proud of. Like where we did this, like we did these camps, and they're here for me. They're not just necessarily here for me as an Ohio State athlete. Like they're here for me as a whole.
Yeah, I second that.
We spent a lot of time talking about like that you play for the name on the front and not the name on the back. But NIL kind of shifts that, and now you are playing for the name on the back to a degree, because the more prominent you become in your sport, the more likely you are to make money in your sport. So how, if at all, does that change your perspective of being a student athlete?
I think in general, it hasn't been a huge part of our team, I think. And I think we are so passionate about winning and having the love for volleyball that we have, that it kind of just gets thrown out the door. Like when we're in that gym, we are there to win, and we are there to do the best we can and succeed. And then we can worry about that when we walk out of that door.
And we can answer.
Thanks.
I trained her in energetics. So.
Yes, she did. She did great.
What questions do you guys have? Yes.
How do you balance with all the responsibilities that you have? How do you balance being students, being athletes, and then also running the camp as well?
Yeah, so we're in season right now, so we're not doing a ton, just some posting on social media. But summer, we have a lot more free time. We just have an hour of conditioning or lifting in the mornings, and then we also had an internship last summer. So we're still busy in the summer, but it's not to the same degree as if we're in season or in spring season.
And it allows you to do it in your schedule, like make it fit your schedule because it's your NIL. So I think that's just super important. Like if you want to do this with a company, like you're in charge of doing whatever you want. So yes, it's busy and you have to find the balance, but also you're in charge of whatever you want to do.
Other questions?
So where do you see this going? Where one of the things I love about NIL is like it teaches business, right? It sounds like everything you said, you all have learned business just from doing this, which I think is so awesome. What do you see the future of your business looking like?
So me and Emily are juniors, and we're definitely run some more camps throughout the spring and throughout our next summer. But after that, we haven't talked a ton. I want to go to med school right after undergrad, so I guess we'll see.
You have plenty of time in med school.
But it's definitely, I didn't think I would ever want to be a coach, honestly. Before this, I didn't want to be a coach, but after this, I'm starting to think a little bit more about it. Definitely not in med school, but afterwards, maybe like a club team or a high school team, take over my high school program, maybe. But yeah, it's definitely opened my eyes.
I'd say the same. Just like working with athletes, and I didn't like kids as much, but now like going through the camps and clinics, I can definitely say I've learned a lot about younger kids. So yeah, I don't know where I'll go in the next few years, but I think being local, I think it's definitely an advantage of how we relate to the community and get our name out there. So I guess we'll see in a few years, but
I do want to coach. Like that's what my dream has always been. So I think going through this and learning it and having it like in my little toolbox will be really helpful for my future and after college, whatever I decide to do. So
This spring, though, we are coaching at our club. I have 12-year-olds, you have 13s and 15s.
Yeah.
So who knows if we would have done that before these camps, but I think we've developed great relationships with the girls at our old club. And we're really excited for that, at least I am.
Is there any downside to this? You know, there's still critics that are out there. Maybe all of you could kind of think about this, who, you know, they're putting in quotes purists, you know, we shouldn't pay amateur athletes. And, you know, there was such a beauty to amateur athleticism and the college experience. And now you're becoming business people. And what's your perspective on that when you hear that?
I haven't experienced any downsides, but I think there's definitely a chance to get a big head from this and to use it, and as you guys mentioned, not the right way. So that's just my perspective. I've enjoyed this space so much, and experiencing with these two, my two best friends, has been so fun. So I'm very thankful.
Yeah, there's definitely not any downsides other than the risk of getting taken advantage of. But I think that's when our compliance and other resources come into play at Ohio State, and they've done a phenomenal job where I've never felt a disadvantage like that ever.
Well, there's a perfect segue to that, Logan, about the new policies that the NCAA has announced, which seem to really limit the university's ability to help and to make sure that they're not taken advantage of. And I'm curious if you could help us understand, you know, all of you, what is the new policy that went into place last month? What does it mean? And how might it affect our student athletes moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and we've obviously been on a lot of calls the last few weeks trying to figure out how we interpret it. And I think for us, we don't really have to change how we operate, because we've operated obviously above board, and our focus has been education, and obviously in the new guidance, that is something that we are still able to provide. So we're going to continue to provide that. And as you can see, can we give them a round of applause? I think this is just a living testament to the fact of what is really is the opportunity that's out there, right? So they've crushed it. They've done a phenomenal job of elevating themselves and their own personal brand, and they each done a phenomenal job speaking to it. I'm fulfilled. I'm fired up. My heart's full. But I think that they've done a phenomenal job. And like I said, so that new guidance, there's a lot to kind of peel back, but we're going to continue to do that education. We're going to continue to make sure that the resources we can provide, we're going to continue to provide. It might look a little bit different, but it's all in how we can continue to educate. And obviously, I hope everyone can see, I think we've done a great job, and they've done a phenomenal job being able to leverage their own personal brand. So, Emily touched on it, we didn't talk about it earlier, but her wanting to be a coach, like that's a lens that we view this, that not many people do, is this is helping her career, right? Like this is an opportunity for her to build life skills and to be able to go out and get experience in a long-term career that she wants to pursue. So we're going to continue to look at it through that lens and continue to service our athletes, all of them that are interested in participating, and hopefully everyone has a phenomenal experience. But yeah, the new guidance, there's a lot of moving parts, but it's going to continue to be that way for a while. So.
What does it say specifically? What was it the day before the new policy came into place, and the day after? What changed?
So the new policy talked a little bit about kind of turn. Boy, it sucks right now. The new policy talked about a few different things. One, education, and what's fascinating is, you know, it talks about how schools should be providing education on things like social media, entrepreneurship, financial literacy, and taxes. And think about everything that they just talked about, right? And yeah, Ohio State is providing that education, and they just talked about how all four of those areas are impacting the work that they're doing with their camps. They also talked about collectives, as we mentioned earlier, and talking about how coaches and administrators can be involved with collectives from a fundraising and awareness perspective, but not from a directing where those funds get to go type of perspective. And it did, wow. It did also talk about how, interestingly, from a compliance and from a enforcement perspective, how there's really kind of now an assumption that if there's a challenge brought to a particular institution in the way in which they're engaging in NIL, that it's going to be on the institution to show that they were not violating the policy or violating the policies in this that have been set forth. So for the most part, those are the areas that kind of the guidance talked about. Now, again, to be clear, this is what they call kind of clarifying guidance, right? Because they're just trying to clarify, which is helpful for schools, right? And for an institution like Ohio State, who are already involved and engaged in doing things the right way, it doesn't necessarily change much. But for some schools were going above and beyond. Because I forgot one thing that it did talk about was that schools can't be involved in the negotiation of a name, image, and likeness deal with a student athlete, right? So they can go out and have a platform. So like whether it's an open doors or influencer marketplace type of platform, they can do that, but that they can't go and actually negotiate between parties, the student athlete and some other group. Because there are some schools that prior to that were actually doing just that. There were some schools that were saying, hey, there's one school in particular that's well known that actually had a person on staff who was acting as an agent for student athletes. And if you wanted to be able to use the institution's marks, you had to use that agent as your agent for deals. Their idea was that it would protect the student athlete. But again, think about what you're doing and the liability that you're taking on by doing that. So the guidance clarified that. And again, it's all about clarifying so that schools, at least until there's some type of national standard for NIL, at least schools have clarification on how they can engage and where that line is. Because for coaches, like Coach Day said it, Coach Holtman said it, and others, it's hard because there's a big gray area and I want to do as much as possible, but I also don't want to cross the line and do something that I'm not supposed to, that I'm not allowed to be able to do.
And what if we had, and this certainly wouldn't happen here, I have no doubt, but what if our student athletes wanted to be involved in products that we didn't think were great? Like, I mean, marijuana is legal in certain states. You know, we have I shared an article with our group here about how sex sells and how there's student athletes that are using their sexuality, women specifically, in order to sell products. Is there control over that now? Should there be? What's kind of your, maybe from a compliance standpoint, the perspective on products that maybe are questionable from the university perspective?
Yeah, so there is currently state law and then OSU guidelines that restrict certain categories that student athletes are able to use or promote. So an example would be marijuana products, controlled substances, sports wagering or casinos, adult entertainment. So there is some of that, I guess, like a morality clause built into the state law. But on top of that, I think what we're really relying on again is education. So if you want to, you know, use your sexuality to promote a bathing suit brand, that ultimately is your decision. We can't tell you what to do, but that's going to be then your brand or affiliated with your brand for the rest of our lives, because we know things don't go away on the internet. So it really is the student athlete's decision ultimately what they want to do, but there are just some guidelines that are in place from both an Ohio law perspective and Ohio State perspective to sort of limit things that are either already against NCAA rules or we just don't want to see our student athletes in that space.
You guys have other questions? We have about 10 minutes left and we want to definitely hear yours.
I'm just curious, and not if you're wearing OSU gear, but are there rules prohibiting like student athletes from doing deals with a rival brand? Like, what if you were in an Adidas ad and you're an Ohio State ad?
Or Pepsi.
Yeah. No, so there is a clause in the state law where universities have the ability to say no to an NIL deal if it does conflict with an Ohio State contract. But a lot of that really stems on where the activity is actually happening. So I think I mentioned that earlier. For Coke, if there is another beverage that's going to be promoted, it can't be promoted on campus. That's built into the Coke contract. But that doesn't mean a student athlete in their own free time can't go and promote Pepsi in their own apartment off campus. So there are some limitations in place, which is why we have a disclosure requirement where student athletes disclose their contracts to us. And then our university looks at it to see whether there could be potentially any contracts and then review those with the student athlete so that the student athlete can get those changed so that there isn't any sort of conflict. But generally off campus in their free time, student athletes are able to sort of do what they want.
Yes.
I want to ask this question because the university has deals like Nike and Kobe and things like that. What are your perspectives on those deals? Because obviously you guys aren't getting compensation for those, but ultimately you're the spokespeople for when you wear Nike on the field or something like that.
I love the gear that our director of ops get. I can say that. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, we're gonna take that.
You don't have to. I mean, I think these are all interesting questions, and, you know, the fact is, the university does get compensated for in ways that we don't even recognize. And so that's gonna be an interesting development as we move forward about what our student athletes get as a population versus what they get individually. I mean, I totally see what you're talking about. Yes, Ryan.
I wanted to ask Luke about, so like, suppose you're representing a student athlete on some sort of a legal matter related to NIL in some way. How do you balance the relationship that you have with the university and the fact that like the client is the student athlete, not the university?
Sure. So from a legal perspective, we always have to have, you go through this very complex process of determining who your client is, and then making sure there's no conflicts in doing that. So we have legal ethical conflicts, which are conflicts that the Supreme Court of Ohio have said these are conflicts, right? You can't have, you can't have parties on opposite sides of a conflict without somebody waiving, right? Or something along those lines, waiving conflict. So I will represent individual student athletes. Like I get to choose that. So my clients on the legal side are predominantly and overwhelmingly professional athletes or retired professional athletes. There are a handful of college student athletes I work with, typically to do just what we talked about, right? Is to protect them from whatever, before they sign a contract and things along those lines. But my focus is on making sure that there's not any type of ethical issue between either what I'm working on with that particular potential client in the matter that they would want me to work on, and my responsibilities in working with the institution. Because I'm not working with the institution in a legal capacity as my legal client, but rather from an education perspective. So if a client or if an athlete were to say, hey, I don't know, I think, to that previous question, I think that I should be getting a portion of the Nike money directly or a portion of the Coke money directly because I'm making, I'm making this product that Ohio State athletics is. I would say, yeah, I'm gonna stay away from that one. Because we have the joy of being able to get client clients as well.
Yes.
So you guys went the entrepreneurial route, you guys started your own business. What are some other ways that your fellow student athletes have taken advantage of NIL that you liked? So maybe they started a business or they were presented with an opportunity other than just, hey, endorse my product.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different opportunities. Like some of the simple stuff could be getting an NIL deal with a local restaurant, or like I do rush bowls on campus and it's just a 1 month type of thing, but it's also so fun. So I think there's a lot of small things you can do, but I know we've had teammates who they're like, I don't even know exactly, but like Champion, she does modeling for them and promotes their products and stuff. So she loves it, and that's what she wants to do. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, but that's what comes to mind from first.
We also had a really cool team opportunity come up with Giant Eagle, and we all had to be on board. So all 16 of us were going to do something big in the community to get that compensation back. So I think that's going to be a really cool opportunity.
Can you tell us what it is?
What do you mean?
What the opportunity? What you're gonna
Like
do?
what we're going to do? I think we're still working with Giant Eagle and talking about it, but I think one of the big ideas that we really liked was just going and talking about how important nutrition is in student athletes and just young females in general.
And another team one that we decided to do this year was our team t-shirts. I know Sarah Sue and a few other teammates kind of designed the whole thing, but they have our numbers on it and our names on the front. And with our signings, we don't get paid for signings. So we're like, well, let's come up with an idea to get something back and use our NIL. So we made team t-shirts, and then as they come through the signings, we see our team t-shirts, and that all comes back. Not all of it, but it still comes back to us. So I think finding little ways to use our NIL, that was just another one that we did.
I don't know if you can answer this one, but
Who?
I know on the OSU team.
Who are you directing it to?
I'm not,
Oh,
whoever can answer the question.
jump ball.
But recently, like the OSU team shop has allowed student athlete names to be on the back of the jerseys. Is that part of NIL that the athletes make off, or is that something that?
Yes, we have a group licensing agreement with a company called Brandar, so student athletes are able to opt into the program if they're interested. So as you get on the team shop, you see jerseys or the team t-shirt that volleyball is able to create. So the team t-shirt, everyone on the volleyball team opted in, so it's actually an equal rev share amongst all 16 of them. And then any other team that would have a full team opt-in would have the same opportunity to do that. And then each individual student athlete is able to have their own jersey or jersey if they, I hate the word jersey, but everyone pictured what I was saying like that. Yeah, so they're able to get, they would get all the revenue share to them individually, since it's not a team shirt from their own individual merchandise. So,
Even though it has the OSU logo on it?
yeah, so that's one way that the student athletes are actually able to utilize Ohio State marks is through the Brandar program and our group licensing agreement. So, 3 student athletes from one team or 6 from one or more teams.
Does the university take a portion of that?
The university will get a portion of that just because it's retail and obviously then it's using our marks. So it's like I said, it's a rev share with the student athletes that opt in. But that's a good opportunity. I was going to speak to that earlier, but it's been cool for our student athletes to be able to create their own merchandise and one way that they can leverage obviously or coexist with the Ohio State University.
Other questions? So whatever, oh, go ahead, sorry.
For from your team perspective, student athletes and Logan, maybe you know from all other student athletes, and the majority of the deals are from companies approaching you, or are student athletes marketing themselves and going to companies to try and get an NIL deal?
For me, it's definitely reach out to, I don't reach out to a ton of companies because I just enjoy the camp space, but if I were, I think I would be the one reaching out. Like I said, I don't have a huge name in college athletics, college volleyball, so I would definitely have to make that important or that connection with someone if I wanted to.
I think we see both sides on our team though. Some people like receive deal opportunities come to them, but a lot of us work hard to get the deals that we want and just really make those connections, like Sarah said, as best we can.
Yeah, I think it's a mix too. I think that we've seen a lot of both, but also I think there's been a lot of education, especially in year 2, as the interest is kind of student athletes have become more aware about educating them how to do that outreach and how to sound professional and how to present themselves. So I think as it continues to evolve, we're gonna have more student athletes being on the offensive, aggressive side of things. Whereas maybe in year 1, everyone was trying to figure it out.
So maybe, because we just have a few minutes left, where do we go? Like what happens next? And I'm looking at you, Luke, because
Me too.
we're all but anyone I want you to jump in, but I think that you have the broadest perspective from kind of across all aspects of this platform. What happens next?
I really think when we look at name, image, and likeness, I think because of the way it started and how we had months and months, but it still seemed like it happened really quickly. I think the NCAA, a lot of people thought the NCAA was going to stop it before it actually came into reality. That didn't happen in part, I think, because of the Alston case. And so schools were really caught off guard, I think, in a lot of ways. And, we talked to a lot of people in Paia's position in other schools across the country that have said, our NIL policy has changed so many times since we first launched it. And I think what and part of that is because too, you have these outside organizations like NIL collectives that come in, these third parties that are coming in to try to define what NIL is. I think the future of name, image, and likeness is really the institutions taking that back over and institutions, colleges, universities deciding what name, image, and likeness looks like. You can imagine a space where NIL collectives don't exist in the way they do today, because schools then take that on to say, you know what, we can direct where funds go. If a donor wants to give money right now to the university as a whole, they can decide, you know what, I want some of my money to go to this department, some to go to that department, and some to go to a general fund. You can imagine the same way that talking to boosters could go the same way, where it's like, you know what, I want some of my money to go to student athletes. I want some of my money to go to facilities in the athletic department generally. So I really do think that schools are ultimately, over the next few years, going to take more control proactively in what name, image, and likeness looks like to really set up kind of the future of name, image, and likeness. I don't think it will continue to be the wild, wild west forever. I think the schools are really going to help to settle the market down to make it a much more normalized opportunity for student athletes that ultimately provides that protection student athletes need.
And literally while we were sitting here, an anonymous donor committed $1 million in matching funds for NIL donations made to Hoosiers, so it's in Indiana, for good or NIL sponsorships. So there we go. There's no shortage of money to be had. Imagine.
Yeah, round of applause for. All right, thank you so much for being here. I learned more than I didn't even know. I didn't know some of this stuff, so it was amazing. We continue to have programming throughout the year. We'll be partnering with Education Community College on a special marketing curriculum event to let everybody know about. I want to introduce our student group leader, Patrick, is in the back there. So we do have a student organization that has many guest speakers come in and does events. They're going to a Blue Jackets game, I think, soon with our sports data analytics club tomorrow. There we go. We'll all be at the Blue Jackets game tomorrow. And then please mark your calendars for 2023, where we will be holding our data analytics conference, which is coordinated by Dr. Reddy and our partnership with the Fisher School of Business, and also Creative Con, which we partner with athletics to provide career readiness for people who want to get involved in sports creative jobs. And lastly, but not least, on January 27th, we're partnering with Arts and Sciences Career Services. If you are interested in a career in sports in any way, we're bringing in people that can help you find out what you need to do to prepare to get a career in sports. So we hope that you will join us. We are thankful that you are here today. Thank you so much to all of you for being here, and best of luck the rest of the season, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all.